The rain hadn't stopped all afternoon, and every drop against the restaurant's glass windows made Emma's heart pound faster. She shifted in her seat for the 5th time, trying to tame her nerves. She wasn't supposed to be here, not with her life so tangled, not with her son sitting across the table drawing superheroes on a paper placemat while waiting for the food to arrive. This wasn't how blind dates were meant to go. The restaurant was soft-lit, filled with the hum of chatter and clinking glasses. Couples leaned close to one another, their laughter ringing with familiarity. Emma's hand trembled as she adjusted her hair and glanced toward the entrance. Any moment now, the man her friend had insisted she meet would walk in. A man she didn't know. A man she already felt she was about to disappoint. "Mommy, is he nice?" Her son, Oliver, whispered, peeking up from his drawing. His hazel eyes carried the kind of hope children had before the world hardened them. Emma's chest tightened. She reached across the table and squeezed his tiny hand. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're just going to talk, okay? You don't have to worry." Still, she worried. How could she explain herself? Her babysitter had canceled last minute and she couldn't bear to cancel the date too. Her friend Sarah had begged her, "Emma, you've got to give yourself a chance. You've been alone too long." But life wasn't so simple. Life was Oliver needing her every moment, bills stacked high on the counter and exhaustion etched into her bones. Then the door opened. A tall man in a dark tailored coat stepped in, shaking rain from his hair. Even from a distance, Emma could see the confidence in his stride. People looked at him without meaning to. He had that presence, the kind that filled a room quietly but firmly. She recognized him instantly from the photo Sarah had shown her. James Carter, 36, CEO of a tech company. A man whose world surely had no space for messy single moms. Emma swallowed hard, her heart racing. She wanted to stand, to apologize before he even reached her, but her legs felt cemented. Oliver looked up too, his crayons momentarily forgotten. James spotted them and began walking over, his steps steady and purposeful. When he reached the table, his eyes flicked to Oliver first, then to Emma. There was no flicker of irritation, no raised brow, just calm, curious eyes. Emma shot up from her chair, nearly knocking her water glass over. "I'm so sorry," she blurted out, her voice cracking. "I shouldn't have. My babysitter canceled and I didn't want to stand you up. I know this isn't what you expected. I'm sorry I brought my son." Oliver looked down, suddenly shy. Emma's cheeks burned with shame. This was it. The man would nod politely, make an excuse, and leave. But James simply smiled. Not the tight, polite smile of obligation, but warm, real, disarming. He pulled out the chair beside Oliver and sat down. "So this must be Oliver," he said gently. "I'm glad you brought him. I was hoping to meet both of you tonight." Emma froze, blinking at him. "Both of us." James shrugged lightly, as though it were the simplest truth. "If someone is important to you, then they're important to me too." Something inside Emma cracked, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding for years. She sat slowly, her heart a tangle of confusion and relief. Oliver looked at James, then back at his mother, then whispered, "Do you like superheroes?" James leaned closer, lowering his voice to match Oliver's. "Of course I do, but don't tell anyone. I have to pretend to be serious at work." Oliver grinned for the first time that evening, handing James his crayon. Within minutes, the two were sketching side by side, creating a lopsided drawing of a caped figure. Emma watched in stunned silence, her throat tightening. No man had ever looked at her son that way before, not with patience, not with genuine interest. Dinner came and went in waves of laughter. Oliver chattered about school, about his dream to become an astronaut, and James listened like every word was gold. When Oliver finally fell quiet, distracted by dessert, James turned to Emma. "You look like you haven't had a chance to breathe in a long time," he said softly. Emma flinched, the words cut too close. "It's been a lot," she admitted. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come tonight. You didn't sign up for." "For honesty," James interrupted gently. Emma, I've sat through dozens of business dinners where people wear masks. This is the most real evening I've had in a long time." Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she forced them back. She didn't want pity. "My life is messy," she whispered. He nodded. "So is mine, just different kinds of messy." For the first time in years, Emma felt seen. Not as the woman who struggled to pay rent, not as the single mom who worked double shifts, but simply as Emma. The night ended with Oliver asleep in her arms, his small head on her shoulder as they stood outside the restaurant. Rain had softened into a mist. James held an umbrella over them, his coat catching droplets. "Let me walk you to your car," he offered. She shook her head. "No, I can manage," her voice wavered. "Thank you for tonight, for being kind." James tilted his head, studying her as though trying to memorize her. "Emma, you don't need kindness. You deserve respect, and you'll get it from me if you let me." Her breath caught. The words stayed with her long after she drove away, long after she tucked Oliver into bed. Over the weeks that followed, Emma found herself drawn into something she never expected. James called, not just to talk to her, but to ask Oliver about his day. He sent her meals on nights she worked late. Sometimes he showed up at the park, rolling up his sleeves to push Oliver on the swings while Emma finally sat down, just to breathe. But it wasn't perfect. Emma battled guilt every step. People whispered, "What could a CEO want with a woman like her?" She lay awake at night wondering when the bubble would burst, when James would realize she wasn't good enough. One evening, after a particularly rough day at work, Emma snapped. She stood in her kitchen, voice shaking. "James, this doesn't make sense. You can have anyone. Why are you here with me?" James stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "Because you're strong. Because you fight for your son every single day. Because you don't even see the incredible woman you are. And Emma, because when I look at you, I see home." Tears spilled over, hot and unstoppable. She hadn't realized how desperately she'd needed to hear those words. For years, she had carried the weight alone, never believing she could be enough for anyone. Oliver padded into the room then, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy, are you crying?" Emma knelt, pulling him close. "Happy tears, sweetheart," she kissed his hair. "Just happy tears." From that night forward, Emma stopped waiting for James to walk away. She allowed herself to believe, piece by fragile piece, that maybe happiness was possible. Months passed. They built routines together, movie nights, pancake breakfasts, afternoons at the park. James didn't try to replace Oliver's father. He simply became another steady presence in his world. One evening, as Oliver proudly showed James a drawing of a family holding hands, Emma's breath caught. In the picture, there were 3 figures, not 2. She looked at James, her heart trembling. He smiled at her, a quiet promise in his eyes. Life hadn't gotten easier. Bills still came, work was still exhausting, motherhood was still overwhelming. But for the first time in years, Emma wasn't alone. And sometimes that made all the difference. On a warm spring night, as they sat on the porch watching Oliver chase fireflies, James took her hand. "Emma, you once apologized for bringing your son on our first date," he said softly. "But that was the best thing you could have done, because I wasn't just looking for someone to love me. I was looking for someone to build a life with, and that life includes both of you." Emma pressed a trembling hand to her lips, her eyes brimming. She had spent years believing her struggles defined her, that her worth ended with her mistakes. But here was a man who saw her strength, who saw Oliver not as a burden but as a gift. The night wrapped around them, filled with fireflies and laughter. And in that quiet, Emma finally allowed herself to believe what she had long forgotten. She and her son were worthy of love. And sometimes, love doesn't arrive in grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes, it shows up when a struggling single mom apologizes on a rainy night, and a man simply smiles and says, "I'm glad you brought him." Because that's where their real story began.